And we are back with another list of cutting boards. Let's get to making. Since y'all enjoyed the last video, let's give it another shot. This time, a new batch of expensive inlay boards and some new designs. Like always, we'll start by breaking down the big boards into smaller boards. But that's not the only thing we need to do. The real key to batching out large orders is organization. I learned that quickly when our business first started picking up steam. Back then, we were making much simpler, lower priced items like dog feeders and floating shelves. We'd crank out 30 plus a week, which was way harder to juggle than a batch of cutting boards. What helped keep us sane was having a solid color-coded list and grouping items into kits. With cutting boards, things are actually much easier. Nothing needs to be stained, we stick to 3 wood types, and everything gets the same finish. Trust me, customers do not like waiting 8 weeks only to get their item in the wrong stain color. That's why streamlining is everything. Fewer options and less variety means fewer mistakes and smoother workflow. It's also why we stopped mass listing items on Etsy. It was stressful, chaotic, and anything but efficient. At first, it's tempting to cast such a wide net, but as orders roll in, you realize it's time to cut things that slow you down. And thankfully, because of your support, we've been able to shift some of that focus into making videos. That's taken a bit of pressure off of the constant sell grind, and that shift gave me the breathing room to focus on more things that I enjoy. And speaking of projects, I've just cut this batch of boards to size. So let's swap spindles and keep things moving. Because we finally got our hands on one of those new onefinity redline spindles. Which will be a little different since our last one was water cooled and this one is air cooled. Honestly, I don't think it'll matter much. I really put this thing to the test making these boards, running it all day long, and it only got a little warm. While that new fancy spindle flattens these boards, I'll start gluing up the rest of the blanks. If my order list looks a little light, I'll even make a couple extra so I'm not scrambling during the holidays. These blanks will sit in the clamps for about an hour before I surface them tomorrow, like the other ones you just saw. And while they're curing, let's talk about another side of woodworking, the waste it creates. I end up with plenty of offcuts, strips, cracked boards, or wood with big knots. Since I charge a premium for my boards, I use the best materials possible. The last thing anyone wants is a board with defects, especially at the price I sell them for. That waste also includes sawdust, usually a couple big garbage bags like this per batch. But that's just woodworking. Most of the lumber I use is domestic hardwood, and much of it comes from trees already at maturity or on their way out. If woodworkers didn't use it, a lot of it would just end up burned or in landfills. I also heat my home in Wisconsin with wood, which comes from my shop or fallen trees that are collected locally. Wood that would otherwise just rot on the forest floor. If you think a small shop like mine makes a lot of waste, go look behind any big cabinet shop. The dumpsters will be overflowing with plywood scraps and hardwood scraps. Waste happens no matter what, but smart workflow keeps you efficient. And that's why I started making these plugs into these large blanks, which are basically tiny end grain boards. I used to make them 1 by 1, which meant a lot of math and stuff. And now I just cut a 48-inch blank and pull from it whenever I need. It's part of all streamlining the process. Less thinking, less fuss, and if I don't use it for plugs, I can always use it to become a full cutting board. I shoot for a finished thickness of about 1/2 inch, and while I was milling down this batch, it got me thinking, why do people only ever buy cherry edge grain boards from me and not walnut? Then I checked our website and realized we'd never even listed a walnut version. Simple lesson, people can only buy what you actually show. Same goes for bigger projects. If all you post is cutting boards, most likely people aren't going to ask you to build the table. But if you want to build more tables, you've got to show people that you can. So for the most part, people are only going to buy what they see you making, and a few random requests. And I planned on doing a walnut version in this batch, but time just got away from me. So instead, let's jump into the fun part, the inlays. I've had so many people to ask me to make a course on how to do these, and I finally did it. In the course, I'll walk you step by step through making these exact boards you see here. You'll get the file, follow along with me, dial in the right offsets for your setup, and start creating inlays of your own. And I think this smaller lower third cross knife design is the perfect board to start on. It has a little bit of detail, and it's not so large you're going to run into a bunch of different problems. So if you're interested, you can check out that link down in the description. And these small inlays aren't the worst, but you still gotta clean out these little fuzzies. And on these small designs, it's not so bad, but the big designs, those can take a while. Why end grain cutting boards, some people ask. First, I just love the cool look of a nice end grain cutting board. Second, End grain inlays and face grain inlays are completely different beasts. End grain is simply more forgiving when it comes to inlays, allowing me to get more detail and cut more aggressively than I could in face grain, or edge grain. And while the cutting board's on the CNC, I like to just get the juice groove out of the way. These are per customer request. I offer them, and I'd say probably 30% of the boards get a juice groove. And my least favorite part of the juice groove is sanding them. But some customers still want them, so I offer them, and no big deal. And speaking of what customers ask for, the most common wood combo, and honestly it's my favorite, walnut and maple. I don't even care on the orientation. But of course, the combo doesn't matter if the plugs don't seat right. I essentially made this custom press. I've heard of others using vacuum bags or other methods. It's just how I started and what I'm comfortable with. I'm sure there's a lot of other solutions. It's just what works best for me. Even with removing these plugs, sometimes I have a pretty good reason why I do something, and other times it's just what's the fastest, easiest method. I have a pretty decent backlog of boards I want to make, but a lot of the time actually bringing those to life gets pushed aside with other orders. I've been wanting to make this board for a while now, I just haven't had time. And the reason I'm so excited to make it is, it's a remake of one of our first designs we ever offered. And in this batch we had an order for the old design, and we showed the new design to that customer and they absolutely loved it. And that gave me the go ahead to make this board become a reality. The problem with the old one was I didn't love the design as my drawing skills weren't as good then, and we only sold that board in walnut with a maple inlay. And as I talked before, you need to make what you want to sell. And currently for me, that's more maple boards. I just love the look of them. So I'm making two of these, one in walnut for that customer and one in maple that I'll take pictures of and list. But being a dark wood and a light wood, this is also a design challenge in itself, which I'll show you later when we finish the walnut version of this board. I recently got the opportunity to test another CNC, and I was so excited to have two machines up and running again. There was a little bit of a lag while I made room and got set up for the new machine, but after weeks of testing and only 3 boards later, I realized it just wasn't the right machine for me. So hopefully soon I'll be back to running 2 onefinities in the shop while I get the other one out of my shop. For production, having 2 CNCs is almost a must. Otherwise it turns into a hurry up and wait game real quick. Realistically, I can only manage 2 machines on my own. I don't have space for a third, and honestly, with 2 running, I'm already busy enough bouncing between them while also working on designs and toolpaths during the longer carves. So for me, 2 machines is ideal, as I personally love the balance of sharing videos with you guys and making things I enjoy, as I don't want to be full on production. And right now, the things I enjoy making are random cool pieces of furniture and these cutting boards. We used to crank out tons of items on Etsy and ship them all over the world, which for some, that might be the dream, but I burned out more than once. We even had helpers and an employee for about 2 years, which brought on a whole new level of stress. And we got to the point where we either had to give up on videos altogether and go all in on selling products, hire a new employee or 2, and we weren't in the position to get a new location with prices and interest rates at an all-time high at that time. And after a lot of thought, we decided to scale back and let our employee go. It just didn't make sense financially or mentally. At the end of the day, I want to build and create. And scaling up sounds great, but in reality, it became copy and paste work, not creativity. Also, the larger you scale and the more employees you take on, the less hands-on you become, and the more it becomes management. And that's why I love making these cutting boards. Most of them are one of a kind, and that's where the fun comes back in. To me, it's so cool that I can put this much detail into a wooden design. CNC or not, it's just awesome that we have the ability to do this. And circling back to the inverse design of that maple skull cutting board, or the many have eaten here cutting board, if you followed me, you've probably seen this design before, but this is the new design, and I shared this exact walnut board to Instagram, and people seem to love it. And a beef cut board. People often tell me I use way too much wood glue. Well, I do, because it's so hard to get the glue down in these little areas without trapped air underneath it. Here, I actually did use too much glue. As you can see, I scraped that off here, but you can't really use too much glue. Obviously, I don't fill it up to the brim, but when I press it into the board, it just squeezes out. And honestly, I was pretty worried about this board because it's made of cherry, and cherry is one of those boards that has drastically different color, and if I get a mixed batch of wood from different areas, you can really kind of tell. And here I'm water popping the boards. This just raises the grain and ensures they don't become fuzzy after you wash them. And here's what I'm saying. You can see it's got all the different color. It's not as noticeable when it's not wet or oiled. This is simply water, but sometimes it just doesn't blend together. Luckily, this customer loved the variation, but not everyone does, and that's okay. I personally do. And that leads us right into the challenge we mentioned earlier, balancing the contrast between dark and light woods in an inlay. Here, I want the skull to be white because skulls are white, so it's more of an outline. And look at that variation on that maple. Whew. And on the walnut board, I had to kind of invert it slightly just so it would look aesthetically correct because I want the skull and the hat white along with the banner on the bottom. So it's a lot more than just inlaying a design in a board. As I'm making these boards, I pretty much finish them as I go. So this batch is getting oiled while some aren't even started yet. I typically try to keep batches around 10 boards, as if I make more than that, it starts to feel less efficient and becomes overwhelming. Just like sanding here. I'd rather sand a few at a time than sit here for days just sanding. When we sold on Etsy, I would literally stand here and sand for days straight. It was soul sucking. Hours of sanding? That's fine. Days of sanding? Not fine. And here's a small detail that I actually like. These little handle grooves. Simple, but they make a big difference. This is a bit I got on Amazon. I'll put a link down in the description, but it is great. And much easier to sand than juice grooves. If you haven't noticed, I do use a lot of machines. I'm a modern woodworker, and I get a lot of crap for it, but honestly, it doesn't bother me. Most of it comes from the same group of people anyway. And here's the funny part. The same people who put me down are the ones who complain about everything being made overseas or XYZ place, and then turn around and bash someone like me. Just a husband and wife team in a small town in Wisconsin trying to make a living. And that's the part that gets me. Shop local, support small business. It all sounds good until it's actually time to do it. Sometimes I catch myself arguing with these trolls, and then I remember, literally half of America reads below a 6th grade level. Suddenly, I don't feel the need to keep arguing. Because running a CNC is easy. All you do is push a button, just like reading a book. They can't do either. If you don't like my stuff, that's totally fine. Not everything is for everyone. But it's the loud ones, the ones who've never even heard of a comma, that always seem to shout the loudest. So just be kind. You can't build yourself up by breaking others down. And speaking of breaking down, this is where me and this machine parted ways. And it could not finish this plug. Luckily, I started with the plug and didn't waste an entire board. So we'll let Old Faithful finish the job. And yep, I could use the CNC to cut this circle out. But by the time I change the bit and do all that, I could just have it zipped out in the bandsaw already. And this is one of those boards that gives people trypophobia or something like that, so I didn't give you a warning, but if you're afraid of holes, I'd look away now. I honestly didn't even know what that meant until I started posting videos of this board online. And on to my favorite part. Oiling the boards. This really makes them come to life and pop. They get a quick oiling. I let them sit overnight, and that food safe oil protects them from water and other types of food stains. It's a pretty crucial step of the board. It'll make it last way longer. So if you have a real wooden cutting board, if it looks dry, give it a little oil. It'll thank you. And this batch, I think we sold 3 cutting board stands. I'll have to make a new design, something maybe a little more fancier, but these are nice and simple, and they do the job. Just like this little AirWeights vacuum bed. And on to the finishing touches. I will get these waxed and take them inside, and then Jess will get them boxed up and shipped off to the rightful owner of these beauties. And thanks for hanging out with me and listening to me ramble for the last 14 minutes. I appreciate all of you who take the time to watch our videos, or buy our boards, or CNC files. And this is the final batch of boards. There's a few missing because those had to get out ASAP, but overall super happy with how they all came out, and we'll see you all in the next one.